The museum smelled of chilled champagne and fresh wax. Elena Voss stood beside the velvet rope in a midnight black Armani suit, her $38,000 Patek glinting on her wrist. She placed her hand on the key. Turned it. A single dry click answered her. Nothing more. 300 guests froze mid-sip. One of her senior restorers laughed nervously. Elena tried again. And again. Each attempt met the same flat refusal. From the back of the atrium a man in gray coveralls stepped forward. His name tag read Marcus. His boots left faint oil prints on the marble. "I can have her breathing in 8 minutes, ma'am." The room detonated with laughter. Glasses clinked. A board member in a Brioni suit actually slapped his knee. Elena's jaw tightened until the muscles stood out like cables. 8 minutes, she repeated, voice ice. "Clean up after the party, Marcus. That's your lane." But something in the way he held her stare made her pause. She gave the slightest nod. 8 minutes. No more. What none of them knew, what the laughter hadn't yet choked on, was that the man they were mocking had drawn the original performance maps for this exact engine family years before any of them were hired. 6 weeks from tonight his signature would sit on the deed to the very restoration company that had just failed her in public. What hidden flaw had survived every diagnostic scan and every expert hand? Elena had spent 11 months and $1.9 million chasing perfection. 12 separate shops. Specialists flown in from Stuttgart, Medina, and a private yard outside Tulsa. Every panel, every stitch of leather, every machined fastener had been authenticated, photographed, and logged under invoice number 7742. The 1968 Shelby GT500 was the crown jewel of her private collection housed in a climate-controlled hangar 30 miles west of Denver. She had built a cybersecurity empire worth $14 billion, yet the only place she still allowed herself to feel awe was under those soft white lights between rows of American steel. This car was never about status. It was the one thing she refused to delegate. Until tonight. The specialists swarmed the open hood like surgeons. Laptops hummed. A portable dyno rack was wheeled in from the service dock. Every sensor returned green. Fuel pressure 42.3 psi. Compression 178 across all 8. Not one code, not one fault. Yet the engine stayed dead. Elena stood with arms folded, the chill of the museum crawling up her spine. She could already see tomorrow's headlines. Her phone buzzed at 10:04 p.m. with the first reporter asking for comment. She silenced it without looking. Marcus kept working the far wall, replacing a burned-out halogen above a 1957 Corvette display. He never rushed. The click he had heard from 60 feet away still echoed in his head like a misfired round. He knew that sound the way other men know a voice in the dark. 2 nights earlier the hangar had been empty except for the night guard making his rounds at 1:47 a.m. Marcus had waited in the shadow of a covered Ferrari until the flashlight beam swept past. Then he moved. He carried only a small LED headlamp and the faded blue shop rag folded in his coverall pocket. The same rag that had traveled with him since the deserts of 2009. 4 minutes. That was all it took to find the corroded ground strap behind the passenger side head, unbolt it, wipe the contact surfaces clean, and swap in the period-correct thermal washer he had machined himself years ago and kept hidden in his locker. The big 428 Cobra jet fired on the first turn of the key. A deep, living rumble rolled across the concrete floor and died just as quickly when he killed the ignition. He buttoned everything back up, left no fingerprints, no tools, no trace. Then he walked away into the dark as if the car had never spoken to him at all. Now, under the atrium lights, that same memory sat heavy in his chest while the specialists argued for 3 more hours. Oscilloscopes flickered. Borescopes snaked through cylinders. A $47,000 engine hoist was rolled in and positioned with theatrical care. Every test returned perfect. The crowd thinned to maybe 70 diehards sipping flat champagne and checking their watches. Elena's reputation curdled in real time. At 10:17 her voice cut across the marble. 8 minutes are up. Show us. Marcus set the ladder down without a word. He carried nothing but that battered flashlight, the 10mm combination wrench, and the faded blue shop rag. The specialist smirked. The lead engineer, Richard Lang, crossed his arms and muttered, "This should be good." Marcus didn't touch a laptop. He leaned in, closed his eyes, and listened to the relay click when the starter was jogged. Then he breathed deep. The faint metallic bite of hot wiring and old fuel told him everything the screens had missed. His hands moved like they belonged to someone else. He traced the ground strap behind the passenger side head, found the thermal washer seated against the block. The part number was correct. The paperwork was flawless. But the tolerance stamped on its edge read 1971 instead of 1968. A difference of 0.004 of an inch. Invisible when cold. Enough to lose contact the moment heat soaked in. He pried the washer free, wiped it with the blue rag until the machining marks caught the light, then swapped it for the correct period piece he had quietly palmed from his coverall pocket 2 nights earlier. 6 minutes and 12 seconds after he started, he stepped back. Try her now. Elena slid behind the wheel. The leather still carried the new car smell. She turned the key. The big 428 Cobra jet exploded to life. A guttural, window-rattling roar rolled through the glass atrium like thunder in a bottle. Every conversation died. Champagne flutes trembled on silver trays. The sound slammed into the ribs of every person still in the room and refused to let go. Richard Lang's face went the color of old concrete. The other 11 restorers stared at the open hood as if it had personally betrayed them. Elena killed the engine. Stepped out. Walked straight to Marcus. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "What did you just do?" He told her the truth, plain and quiet. One mismatched thermal washer. A tolerance stack no diagnostic tool on earth would ever flag. Only someone who had lived inside these blocks for years would have known where to look. The silence that followed felt heavier than the engine noise. The atrium doors hissed open and the rest of the guests poured back in, drawn by the roar like moths to a flame. Someone started slow clapping. It spread. Elena's eyes never left Marcus. She reached out, touched the faded blue shop rag still dangling from his belt, the same one she'd seen him carry for 3 straight weeks. "You kept that thing like it was a security blanket," she said. Her tone had shifted from skepticism to something closer to awe. Marcus folded the rag once, the way he always did, and slipped it into his back pocket. He didn't answer. He simply nodded toward the open hood and the tiny washer now lying on the fender like a spent bullet casing. Number 4471. The original had been sitting in a cigar box in his garage since 1972. Richard Lang finally found his voice. "Lucky guess," he muttered, but the words sounded hollow even to him. His Brioni suit suddenly looked one size too large. The Patek on his wrist caught the overhead lights and flashed like a guilty beacon. Elena ignored him. She turned to the crowd, voice steady. "Gentlemen. The reserve on this Mustang just doubled. Any objections?" None came. The auction resumed at a fever pitch. Bids climbed in crisp increments, $412,000, $478,000, $521,000. Marcus stayed in the background, arms crossed, watching the blue rag's faint oil stain slowly darken the fabric of his pocket. He could still smell the hot wiring on his fingers. That night the texts arrived at 2:14 a.m. Richard first. How? Then Elena. We need to talk. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. My office. Marcus read them both, set the phone face down on the kitchen counter, and went back to reading his daughter's bedtime story. Little Sophie had fallen asleep clutching her worn stuffed rabbit, the one with the missing ear he'd sewn back on during a deployment in 2009. He kissed her forehead, the scent of strawberry shampoo mixing with the faint garage smell that never quite left his hands. Marcus arrived in the same coveralls, grease still under his nails. Elena closed the door behind him. No assistant. No witnesses. She poured 2 coffees, black, and slid one across the glass desk. I ran the cereals last night, she said. Her voice had lost every trace of the polished auctioneer. That thermal washer. The tolerance. The way you knew the exact click in the relay. You didn't just restore cars, did you? She slid a single sheet across the desk. A faded service record. Top line, Marcus J. Hale, Chief Powerplant Engineer, Pratt & Whitney, 1968 to 1974. Responsible for every test cell that certified the very 428 Cobra jet now sitting in her showroom. Marcus took a slow sip. The coffee burned his tongue, grounding him. I built the first 20 prototypes, he said simply. Before the suits decided a janitor's son had no business in the clean room. I walked away in '74 with a box of parts and a promise I'd never come back. That promise lasted until you called me 3 weeks ago. Elena's hands trembled slightly around her mug. She set it down. I humiliated you in front of my entire team. In front of clients worth 8 figures. I let Richard treat you like scrap. Her eyes met his. I'm sorry, Marcus. Privately. From the woman who should have known better than to judge a man by the rag in his pocket. He studied her for a long second, then gave the smallest nod. The blue rag stayed folded in his coveralls, a silent witness. The boardroom on the 31st floor was standing room only 2 days later. Every restorer, every specialist, every investor who had smirked at the grease monkey, now sat in leather chairs under recessed lighting that smelled faintly of lemon polish. Elena stood at the head of the table. Richard Lang sat at the far end, tie loosened, the Patek hidden beneath a cuff. She didn't waste time. 2 nights ago we nearly lost a $600,000 sale because we trusted diagnostics over experience. Marcus Hale didn't just fix the Mustang. He reminded us what this building used to stand for before spreadsheets replaced ears and hands. She clicked a remote. The screen behind her lit up with the original 1968 blueprints, Marcus's signature in the corner in faded blue ink. Seat 18C on the red-eye from Detroit had carried those same prints home in 1971. Gasps rippled through the room. Richard's face went pale again. Elena continued. Effective immediately, Marcus Hale is named Director of Authenticity. His decisions are final. And Richard, she looked straight at him. You will personally apologize. In this room. Right now. The silence was absolute. Every eye turned. Richard stood slowly. His Italian shoes squeaked once on the marble. He cleared his throat, the sound raw. I called your work scrap. I mocked the only man who still remembered why these cars mattered. I was arrogant, blind, and wrong. His voice cracked on the last word. He looked directly at Marcus. I'm sorry. Publicly. I hope you'll let me learn from you instead of competing against you. Marcus remained seated. He pulled the blue shop rag from his pocket, unfolded it once, and laid it flat on the mahogany table like a flag of truce. The oil stain had dried into the shape of a tiny rabbit ear. Sophie's rabbit. The one he'd been repairing the night the original washer had first failed in a test cell 46 years earlier. "I'm not here for revenge," he said, voice low and steady. "I'm here because that car still deserves to run right. Same as it did in '68. Same as it will next week when my daughter rides shotgun for the first time." The room stayed quiet long after he finished. Then, one by one, the specialists began to applaud. Not polite golf claps. Real ones. The kind that rattle windows. 3 months later the Mustang sat under the sodium lights of the same atrium, now fully certified, VIN plate gleaming. Elena had lowered the reserve to honor the man who saved it. The winning bid came in at $178,000 even. The buyer, a quiet retired test pilot, shook Marcus's hand and pressed a small envelope into it. Inside was a single dog tag stamped with the call sign, Ghost 287. The same one Marcus had earned on 287 secret test flights no one ever logged. That evening Marcus drove the Cobra jet home with Sophie strapped securely in the passenger seat. The big 428 rumbled beneath them, perfectly timed, perfectly warm. She clutched her stuffed rabbit, now fully repaired, its new ear made from the same faded blue shop rag he had carried for decades. The leather still carried that new car smell mixed with something sweeter, strawberry shampoo and the faint metallic bite of hot wiring done right. As the city lights blurred past the window, Sophie asked, "Daddy, why does the car sound happy now?" Marcus smiled into the rear view, the weight of every dismissal, every muttered, "This should be good," finally paid in full. Because someone finally listened to what it was trying to say. In the quiet that followed, the morals settled between them like the steady thrum of the engine. Respect is not a title printed on a door. It is a tolerance measured in thousandths of an inch, earned in the dark, and paid forward in the light. Status fades. Competence endures. And sometimes the man holding the rag is the only one who remembers the song the machine was built to sing.